I'm always on the lookout for RPG Maker horror games that I haven't played before. They always showcase just how much you can make with what tends to be seen as a fairly rudimentary game engine. Time and time again, I've been blown away by the stories and atmosphere in these games. That brings us to Mad Father, one of my most requested games. Let's take a look at the description from VG Person's website. Aya Drevis, we're gonna say Drevis, is a young girl living in an isolated mansion in northern Germany. Since her mother's passing, she felt lonely living with just her father and his assistant Maria. What's more, having heard the screams from the basement, she knows her father's secret. That sounds awesome. I'm always down for some spooky experiments in media, and I've been told the story behind this game is super interesting. This game originally came out in 2012, but I'll be playing the updated 2016 Steam version. Let's take a look and see if this game is as good as everyone says. This game contains scenes and imagery that some players may find okay. After that cut-off content warning, we get a short introductory cutscene showing off items like a doll and a book containing photos of a disfigured person. There's a setting card stating that we're in the mountainous outskirts of Germany in the Drevis residence. It is quite literally on screen for 3 seconds, making this the second time that something important to read has been ripped away far too quickly for most people to read it. I usually like to read text out loud so that I'm going slow enough that the average person could read it alongside me, and I was being cut off before even reaching the halfway mark. I really wish they had just bound this transition to a button press, which they immediately do for the dialogue in the very next screen. This is Aya Drevis, a young girl who has wandered down to the basement in search of her father, despite the fact that she's forbidden from being here. She claims that she's too scared to sleep alone, so her father reminds her that her mother is always watching over her from the afterlife and that there's nothing to be worried about. Aya's mother died exactly 1 year ago as of the next day, so they'll be visiting her grave in the morning. As Aya leaves, some noises can be heard from her father's workroom. Was that a chainsaw? That was a chainsaw, oh my god. Aya, are you unfazed by this? Aya is indeed unfazed by this because, as she puts it, she knows her father's secret. He's a scientist that always locks himself in the basement to work. Screams, both animal and human, echo through the halls as he does so. Because Aya cares so much for her father, she pretends not to know what's going on down there. She'll ignore her father's experiments as well as the fact that he seems to be in a relationship with his lab assistant. I am really hoping that that relationship started after your wife's death, Mr. Drevis. Aya returns to her room, staying awake until midnight and thinking about her mother. We finally get control here and can look around. You can make Aya talk to a portrait of her mother about how she doesn't like the lab assistant, and look at this creepy doll she was given by her father. She reflects on when she first got it, claiming it almost looked alive. Yeah, Aya, I would bet money that it probably is alive and that your father made it himself. In a game called Mad Father, I'm just gonna assume the absolute worst of the man at all times, just in case. After examining the bookshelf, Aya stumbles upon a gem. There are 20 gems to collect, and doing so is well worth it. You not only unlock an extra cutscene at the end of the game, but also an entire extra gameplay scenario. Aya heads over to her rabbit Snowball when the world around her suddenly becomes cold. The young girl freaks out and hops back into bed, dreaming of her childhood. Here we learn that Aya's mother was sick, leading to her death. What was that? That sounded like father, prompting Aya to get up and rush to the basement to check on him. Unfortunately for her, something in the house has other plans. Undead entities roaming the hallways are quickly closing in on Aya. The voice of a young boy calls out to her from a nearby room offering to help, but he turns his head to reveal that he's dead as well. Aya sprints back to her room, coming face to face with a mysterious, almost vampiric looking man. Okay, I think we need to talk about the character portraits. For the most part, the portraits look really good. The only exception thus far have been the adult males, which kinda confuses me. The artist clearly has a lot of talent, so why are this guy and father so much lower quality? It's really goofy and caused my immersion from the chase scenes to shatter. I also noticed that father's skin was colored slightly outside the line art on his chin in the flashbacks, and now I can't unsee it. The man introduces himself as a salesman named Ogre before explaining the presence of the undead. It's a curse brought upon by the spirits of those who were experimented on by her father. Everyone he killed has taken a physical form with the hopes of getting revenge over their torment and lost lives. Despite everything father has done, Aya is still determined to save him from his fate, sprinting from the room in the hopes of saving his life before his victims can take it for themselves. The mansion is full of an assortment of deadly encounters, and I really adore how they executed them. There are a lot of different ways that you can die. It's honestly on par with the witch's house, but this game lets you use skill to continue your playthrough, which I think is genius. While in the witch's house, you would try something, get a cool death scene, and then have to start all over from your last save point, Mad Father allows you to save yourself if you react quickly enough. There are quick-time events that let you dodge out of the way if you interpret your instructions in time. Sometimes it's just one button, sometimes it's several in a long sequence. I think giving yourself another chance to live through a stressful test of skill is a great move. Getting caught off guard enough that I messed up the QTE was genuinely fun because at that point, the death was my fault. It didn't feel unfair. There was no frustration from examining something simple only to lose a ton of progress in a fraction of a second. Aya rushes to the basement in the hopes of finding her father safe and sound, but she runs into a pile of dolls blocking the entirety of the basement hallway. She could theoretically climb over them, but something about these dolls seems off. The first QTE I ran into involved this doll falling from the ceiling on the central main floor hallway. When Aya returns to this area, the doll has stood up on its own and has begun walking away, most likely due to the curse. After grabbing another gem from the hallway, Aya returns to her room, finding that Ogre is now missing. Feeling a bit lonely, she grabs Snowball to take him along with her. This initiates another memory sequence, showing a distressed Aya searching for an injured Snowball. Father shows up with Snowball nearby, his wounds miraculously healed. Not patched up, healed. Father claims that Snowball is a part of the family and he will be treated as such. With her friend now accompanying her, Aya moves to her parents' bedroom. Jesus Christ. Oh, why did that get me so bad? That's the highest pitch scream I've uttered since puberty, and I feel obligated to share it since that scare caught me so off guard. After that very loud request to find one of the victim's daughters, I think we'll have to keep an eye out. Inside the bedroom, there's a safe and a key to the archives, which Aya promptly uses. The archive is full of an assortment of books documenting Father's experiments, as well as a note stating hints on how to unlock the bedroom safe. One shelf contains a diary that seems fairly beat up. It's not entirely legible. It reads, "This is a nightmare. How could this have happened? Killed a bird just like..." There's a second diary further away that is far more legible, documenting Father's search for eternal beauty. Supposedly he found a way to ensure that the body will never fade even in death. My immediate assumption was that Father was attempting to preserve his wife after her untimely death, which is a little trite if it ends up being true. The final book Aya looks at is a tale about a girl with the power to control fire, killing everyone who stands in the way of her goal of finding her family. She was never able to achieve that goal, losing control of her powers and destroying the entire world before she could find them. Being the impressionable young child that she is, Aya decides that she would like to burn down her obstacle, the pile of dolls, just like the book's protagonist, because the book had such a happy ending. Before she can leave to gather the materials to craft a torch, Aya is stopped by another victim, presumably the child of the jump scare mother. The child seemingly drags Aya into the memories of their death, where she witnesses her father and Maria conducting unspeakable experiments. Aya escapes this flashback by punching the child in the throat. They drop a pendant, which she grabs for later use. Outside the archives, a corpse appears with a glowing red field of vision. Aya ducks behind a statue, watching as the corpse pushes a cart through a blockade, opening a new area. There's a gem to grab in this new area, but doing so will spawn a corpse that will attack Aya. This is where I learned about the health bar. It regenerates, but only after an event is stopped. If you can't escape in time, you're done for. After that encounter, Aya takes a look at the safe hint note. She has to count the chandeliers in the entrance hall, the changing room hats minus the bathroom planters, the red dolls in the doll room, and the barrels in the cafeteria. Each of those will reveal one digit to the code. She counts the chandeliers, then returns to the bedroom to give the pendant to the mother. This reunites the family, earning us another gem. Next up is the doll room. I hate the doll room. It is chock full of dolls, just as creepy as the one Aya was gifted as a child. She counts the red ones, including 2 hidden behind some curtains, then heads downstairs to explore the main level. The right hall contains a changing room with 5 hats and a raggedy old dress, as well as a heavily bloodied bathroom containing 3 plants. There's a gem in here too, but the corpses do not like it when you take it. That gives us the 3rd digit to the code. The left hall contains a reception room with a lit fireplace. Crying can be heard from inside of it, so let's go ahead and keep our distance, shall we? Examining a painting on the wall here results in a doll bursting through it with a knife. This is our first extended QTE with 3 pages of button prompts to survive. After throwing the doll off, it is revealed that there's a safe behind the painting. Aya grabs a key from atop a cabinet, using it on the safe to retrieve a knife. Since Aya needs cloth to make a torch, she heads back to that old dress and cuts some material from it before dropping the knife because there's no way that could come in handy later. Aya heads off to the cafeteria, which has no barrels, revealing the final digit of the code. There's a curtain in the corner that can be opened and shut, which acts as a place for a scare with that doll from earlier. Something I think is is kinda weird and abrupt is that some of the scares in this game happen for a fraction of a second, then disappear without any transition. Like in the archive room, Ogre was in the corner, and then when you get close, he just blips out of existence. Same thing with the doll here. I'm sure it probably makes some people worry that they're seeing things, but I know what I saw the first time around, so it just feels oddly abrupt to me. With the combination written down, Aya unlocks the safe, grabbing herself a lantern and a bottle of her mother's perfume. This initiates a disturbing flashback. During most of these past scenes, Maria is mentioned in one way or another. I was hoping that even though she's been acting as Mr. Drevis's assistant, that's all it was until well after his wife's passing. This cutscene shows us that it was a full-on affair that both Aya and her mother were completely aware of. After finding out, Mrs. Drevis went into a fit of rage upstairs, throwing about her belongings, including this bottle of perfume, which was an anniversary gift. Aya's glad to see that after the outburst, she put it back and took care of it. I'm kind of in disbelief that Mother didn't kick down the door and confront them right away. Next to the cafeteria is the kitchen, which has the blood-covered corpse of a dog inside, feasting on whatever it can. Aya sneaks past, grabbing some wood for her torch and pulling back the corner of a carpet to reveal a cellar that leads to a storeroom. The door is locked, but there's a hole in the wall that Snowball can fit into. He grabs some wire from the corner, dropping it at Aya's feet before running away. Aya doesn't seem all too disturbed by this, assembling her torch and moving to leave without a care in the world. Before exiting the kitchen, Aya dunks her torch in a massive container of oil so it will burn better. She ignites it using the fireplace, then sets the dolls ablaze. They scream while burning, so I'm glad there was not an attempt to crawl over them. Something I like to do while waiting for obstacles in my path to burn to the ground is think about this video's sponsor, GamerSupps. GamerSupps sells a delicious energy formula that'll keep you up and at 'em while you murder living dolls in your father's mysterious torture mansion. It's 0 calories, keto-friendly, and contains essential vitamins. They have both caffeinated and caffeine-free versions of their products, so there's something for everyone. It's totally up to you and what you need to be at your best in this incredibly realistic scenario that we've all experienced. Make sure to use code Ben again at checkout to get 10% off your entire order. With her only obstacle turned to ash, Aya heads further down the hall to search for her father. On the way there is a room full of extensive laboratory equipment as well as some jars full of body parts. There are also 2 or maybe 2.5 babies here. One of them has 2 heads, and I'm not sure if I want to know whether father sewed that on or grew it from scratch. A jar of eyeballs falls from the table, so Aya takes it for some reason. The next room is the primary experiment room, where Maria is bloodied on the floor but breathing. She tries to stand, telling Aya to leave and save herself. She indicates that Mr. Drevis is further inside and mutters something about Mrs. Drevis before passing out. Ogre is in this room, although he refuses to answer any questions, telling Aya to look for herself. She grabs a key from the floor by Maria's unconscious form before moving forward. The corpse of her mother stands above her father, dragging him away and closing the door. It appears as though Aya's mother was a victim as well. Ogre steps out from behind one of the testing containers, claiming that the events of the night were brought about by her mother. Her malice towards father manifested in the form of a curse. Aya refuses to believe this, claiming that her mother loves her father. She even understood and supported his unusual work. That's kind of insane to hear. I guess if Aya found out about the experiments, her mother would have had to have known as well, and this didn't bug her at all? Aya thinks for a moment, realizing that maybe the grudge was born after the affair. She runs away from Ogre before she can resolve this internal conflict. The next room has several bodies lined up in 2 rows. One has only a head and one has only a body, so Aya lures the body towards the head to reunite them for a gem. This leaves 2 tables with blankets available for later use. The next room shows a locked-up woman with no eyes. Aya tries to get her attention since she has a whole jar to spare, but nothing works. Every other room in this area is blocked off by wood for the time being, so Aya makes her way up a ladder at the end of the corridor. This leads to the interior of a shed that also has a bedroom for some reason. There's another abrupt doll jump scare here, but this time it doesn't phase out of existence. It disappears after you leave the room. The bedroom contains a book with details on good luck charms. Supposedly it works by kissing someone you love on the forehead and saying a blessing. I'm sure that'll be important later, but for now, let's move on. The next room is the main area of the shed, where Aya finds a miniature chainsaw. She has a flashback to when her father found her playing with it and scolded her for the dangerous behavior. He tries to ask her how she managed to get it when he put it somewhere out of her reach, but she just keeps crying and apologizing without any real answers. They don't really address the most interesting part of the scenario here. Why do they own a child-sized chainsaw in the first place? Who bought it? We can actually use this mini chainsaw throughout the rest of the game to break down barricades and open boxes. We can't use it on enemies, but it greatly improves our maneuverability throughout the mansion. Behind those wooden barricades are a bottle of flame retardant and some old dude claiming that Aya's mother is crazier than Dr. Drevis and will be responsible for the creation of a demon. Aya ignores this, grabs a gem, then moves from the shed to a newly unlocked kitchen door. She heads back to the fireplace using the fire retardant to put it out. She now recognizes the crying as belonging to the eyeless girl. Realizing that the rooms must be connected, she tosses the jar of eyes through a hole in the fireplace. I waited here for any sound to indicate that the plan worked and got jump scared by that knife doll again. I have no idea if hesitating anywhere else can lead to this, but I kinda hope so. It was kinda cool. Upon exiting, Aya spots a sad victim entering the right hall, following him until she reaches a locked door. Using the key Maria had, she unlocks Maria's quarters and investigates. The only interactable object is a diary, detailing how Maria came to work here. She was homeless on the streets when Mr. Drevis found her and thought she would be suitable as one of his human subjects. She was placed in a cell with an injured man, who she patched up using a few medical supplies on a shelf as well as her clothing for bandages. She successfully stabilized someone that the doctor assumed would die, proving her worth as more than just another subject. From that point onward, she worked as his assistant, pledging her life to him. Reading this diary causes Aya to empathize with Maria more than she ever had before. Maria really does love Father, which is obviously a shared sentiment. Now, despite the fact that Aya thinks that, my takeaway was that I don't think Mr. Drevis has any feelings for Maria. I think he's just using a facade of love to ensure her loyalty, especially after the whole entrust me with the rest of your life stuff. It's very clinical terminology, but maybe he caught feelings later? I just really do not trust him. Aya makes her way back to the eyeless girl, who unlocks the door as thanks for returning her eyes. This unlocks an entirely new area of the mansion. Well, kinda. This appears to be an infinitely looping passageway, all caused by this victim right here. Aya negotiates with them, agreeing to take her outside in exchange for freeing the hallway. Unfortunately, Aya is pulled into the memory of the girl's death, this time from a first-person perspective.
Well, that certainly is a mad father.
Yep, she's dead. Aya wakes up, finding the girl even more dead than before. The no longer infinite hallway leads to a massive doorway with the locked door and a missing lever that she begins to search for. Upon following the instructions of this stoic old man, she stumbles upon a lab containing several jars full of snowballs? That can't actually be Snowball though, right? Look at the leg of the one right here. It's injured, just like in the flashback. I think Father has backup snowballs in case something ever happens to the rabbit, and that's why the wound was miraculously healed during that flashback. Is he cloning them? We did see those weird mutated babies earlier, so it's not impossible. This room has a book full of images that Aya is too afraid to look at, as well as a big guy suspended from the ceiling that Aya can release using her chainsaw, netting her another gem at the cost of the old man's life. To the right, Aya finds a bathroom with a key in one of the toilets, washing it off before heading north to a cell block where it can be used. The cell it's used on has a large crack in the wall that Aya can squeeze through, leading to a very dangerous area. If you make a single sound in this room, a doll will descend from the ceiling and end your existence. Lucky for Aya, there are puddles, cracks, and rats all around to make sounds with. It's actually not too difficult to navigate. You just need to be slow and cautious and not step on any creaky wood. On the end, there are some cracks on the floor that a strong impact could break, so Aya uses her chainsaw to deliberately summon a doll onto the square, shattering the floor and netting her the lever. You don't even have to head all the way back through the tough way. Whenever you do something tricky regarding stealth in this game, you're given the option to skip right back to the start, which I really appreciate. Aya places the lever, unlocks the door, runs into Ogre, he says one sentence, then she heads towards a doorway in the back. But before I talk about that, we need to discuss music. Simple, spooky, just the right amount of ominous, it all perfectly complements the game, except for the track for this entire area. Let me play it for you right now. It's not terrible, right? Well, imagine spending an hour and a half listening to this on loop. I actually took my headphones off for the second half of the game because I was so sick and tired of it. Most instruments you can listen to for a very long time without them getting annoying. The theremin is not one of those instruments for me. I felt like I was playing a crappy 2000s horror flash game. Aya moves to the kitchen where she gets choked out by a ghost, passing out on the floor and dreaming of the days when her mother would read her bedtime stories. I'm sorry, what the hell is the book she's reading to her infant daughter? That seems a little mature for someone of that age, doesn't it? Aya and her mother talk about always supporting Father no matter what until she wakes up 2 rooms back. The boy from the very start of the game seems to have taken her here after finding her. He bandaged his face to look less creepy. The two talk about how his injury came from Mr. Drevis, but he doesn't really care about that right now. He just wants to save Aya. She refuses, determined to save her father no matter the cost. Whoa, no! You. Maria enters the room, assuming that the boy was hurting Aya and throwing several knives into him. Maria tries to convince Aya to leave, the same exact thing that the boy was doing. She walks towards the door, stepping on his body, and warning Aya that the road ahead is far too dangerous for her. Maria leaves to rescue father while Aya leans down to check on the boy. He's still alive, but barely. As with the other victims, he sends her back to his memories. The boy used to work at the mansion. Well, kind of. It seems that this was a common excuse used by father while collecting victims. He would grab them, offer them a job, then tell them that they're part of a big happy family and that he's the newest member. Apparently the boy lost his family, including a younger sister. Father tries to tell him that Aya could be like a new sister to him, but he dismisses this very quickly. Later that day, the boy ran into Aya sleeping on a couch. Not wanting her to catch a cold, he grabbed a blanket for her, talking to her as she slept. He's determined to be helpful to the family as thanks, not realizing that in mere hours he would be taken away for experimentation, with Aya never having actually met him. The memory stops with the boy slumping over, unmoving. Aya follows Maria, running into a starving victim and grabbing him some food before continuing. Further down is a puzzle where you have to make two sides of a room symmetrical. This isn't anything too groundbreaking, but I like that the final step requires Aya to stand where one of the dolls is. Completing this puzzle leads to a place called the Room of Memories, where reading a book takes Aya into the physical manifestation of some kind of diary. This area is comprised of several small puzzles. The side will state something like, "I slept cuddling up against my mother," meaning Aya has to push this child against the mother to unlock the next area. As we continue, a story unravels. The story of Aya's father. As a child, he would kill animals for fun, hiding them in the dresser to prevent his mother from finding them and becoming upset. She eventually learned of his hobby, prompting him to silence her in the only way he knew how. He ran away with his mother's dead face never leaving his mind. It was an obsession. He wanted to see more people's dead faces. That's the last entry. This definitely explains his motive for experimenting on living creatures, but I don't fully understand how he makes such a luxurious living. He didn't inherit wealth, he had literally nothing after running away. Before Aya can make it much farther, her legs collapse beneath her. She's done too much without rest. Ogre takes her to a nearby bed where she has another dream, this time of her mother performing the good luck charm from earlier. She wakes to the smell of her mother's perfume, quickly realizing that this is because one of the living corpses has taken it. The victim books it, but Aya quickly catches up. That little girl was trying to see if a rat liked the scent. The experiment failed, with the rats detesting it enough to run away. There's a corridor to the east that is filled to the brim with rats. Since they hate the scent of the perfume, Aya douses herself in it to safely pass. This takes us to one of my favorite little puzzle chase sequences in the entire game. There are a ton of these small gated off rooms, one of which has an item of interest. When you walk past them all, an axe-wielding corpse shows up and attacks Aya, who quickly hides in the only open room. After discovering a hidden room underneath a coffin, she realizes that this room and the one with the item are connected. The item is a herbicide which can be used to free the overgrown doors, allowing the corpse to chase her once again. The passageway beneath the two rooms has a huge statue that can be used to block the way forward, but Aya still has to quickly loop back around and lock the newly free gate to trap the victim inside. I really like this chase. It's very anxiety-inducing with how quickly you have to react, and I like that you have to use the environment to trap an unkillable enemy. The next room contains another doll that blocks the path forward. The perfume girl shows up and tells Aya that the only way to remove the barrier is to destroy the doll. She's kind enough to show Aya to a newly unlocked door leading to an incinerator. There's a cat with its stomach slit open on the way here, making this the second RPG Maker game I've played from 2012 where a cat gets killed in this way. Aya quickly finds herself in a maze of corridors patrolled by dolls with those red vision cones. I like that the cones are here because you can more easily identify their patrol patterns, but I can see how some people would want less of an indicator to keep things spooky. After 3 different areas of doll stealth, Aya arrives at the building containing the incinerator. There's some kind of conflict on the other side of the door, leading to the girl being killed by an assortment of scalpels. Just gonna grab one of those, don't mind me. After grabbing it, she sends Aya into another flashback, revealing the details of her death. Despite all of this, Aya is still determined to save her father. The door to the incinerator is locked, although there's a key right in the other room. Unfortunately, the dog from the kitchen is near and they eat it before running away. There are several rooms to get through before we can catch up to that dog, one of which being this one with another murder doll inside. There's a ladder to climb, allowing for access to the chandelier. With a swing of the chainsaw, the doll can be crushed, but it's not that simple. Aya has to set up a wooden plank leading over to it, then weigh down the end with sandbags so she doesn't fall. Aya crushes the doll with the chandelier, moving to a greenhouse area growing mandrakes. Mandrakes are little plant people that scream when you uproot them. This can be used in in the final room where the dog is. There's a mechanical arm attached to this machine that you can set up to yank the mandrake out, killing the dog through the sheer volume of the scream. Unfortunately, it's on a timer, so Aya needs to get out of there as quickly as possible. Originally, I just ran away as far as I could and then died, but eventually I realized that the greenhouse has to be soundproof since that's where all the mandrakes are in the first place. Now that the dog is dead, Aya uses her scalpel to cut the key free and unlock the incinerator, tossing the doll in despite all its efforts to dissuade her. It even mimics her mother's voice, which is kind of terrifying. Aya returns to the room now that she can pass, but she is stopped by the silhouette of a doll. It asks her why she keeps trying to save her father after learning so much about his wrongdoings, about the innocent people that he's tortured and killed. Aya doesn't know if what she's doing is right. She just knows that she promised her mother that she would support her father no matter what. The doll claims that if she saves him, innocent people will suffer again, but Aya says that she can fix him, because she knows that there's a kind person in there somewhere. Alright, executive decision. Aya is no longer allowed to use Tumblr. Aya leaves and the doll father gave her all those years ago reveals itself as the speaker before walking away. This is your final spoiler warning for this game. I'm going to be discussing each of the 3 endings as well as the 2 extra game modes in detail, so if you want to avoid major ending spoilers, please skip the timestamp on screen and in the description. As Aya makes her way through the final door, a massive portal appears at the end in the center of a very elaborate machine. Ogre appears, explaining that this portal leads to another world and that it's far too dangerous for someone like her, but if she insists on going, he will give her something to help. It's magic water, a product from the company that he's a salesman for. He won't explain how, but supposedly it has the power to stop the curse. Aya steps through the portal with Ogre chuckling and wondering what decision she'll make. The other world is a dark, space-like void with red glowing platforms. Mother, Father, and Maria are all here, but Aya can't get close. Mother admits that everything was her doing, adamant that this needed to happen to prevent Father from taking any more victims. Shockingly, Aya calls her out. Mother knew about the experiment, so all of this has to be about Maria, doesn't it? Mother laughs, admitting to the falsity. She couldn't bear the thought of losing her husband and decided that she could keep him forever by taking him along to the afterlife. Aya begs to go with them, but her mother wants her to live a full, happy life. She runs towards her parents, being blasted backwards. Father gains consciousness, lifting his head and calling to Aya, who rushes forth, bringing him to the other side of the platform. Mother is in an obsessive frenzy, the only thought on her mind being taking Father for herself, the safety of her child be damned. The game gives you an option here that dictates the ending you'll get. If you choose to grant Mom's wish, you'll be locked into Bad End 1. If you choose to save Father, you're put on the path of Bad End 2 and the true ending. We're going in the order with the least amount of backtracking, so let's do Bad End 1 first. Aya declares that Mom loves Father more than anyone else, so she can't take him away from her. He looks up in horror before being taken away. Aya wakes up in a room full of dolls that she has never seen before. Behind some curtains in the center is an Iron Maiden pouring blood across the floor. Aya leaves the room, stumbling upon Maria and shaking her awake. The girls stand in the home's prayer hall with Aya solidifying her resolve to keep living her life. She tells Maria that she's welcome to stay here if she has nowhere else to go. Maria knocks Aya unconscious, dragging her to the experiment room. She speaks aloud, promising the doctor that she will make sure the future he wanted for his daughter will be seen through. That was a pretty interesting ending. I'm especially fascinated by what happened with Maria. Earlier in the game, Father made a big point that Maria was supposed to make sure no harm came to Aya, but then here she was deliberately putting her on the operating table to do God knows what. I'm sure a lot of you have put it together by now, myself included, but I'll hold off on explaining until the game's official reveal. For Bad End 2, Aya refuses to allow Father to die, using the magic water on her own mother. She begins to fade away, with Aya reaching out one final time but failing to grasp her. Aya and Father wake up in the same room from Bad End 1. Father apologizes for worrying Aya, stating that Mother must have gotten lonely, so they should visit her grave to soothe her spirit. The conversation halts as Mother's spirit descends from the ceiling, claiming she didn't want Aya to know the truth, but using the last of her power, she needs to share it. She sends Aya into a flashback, one that we've seen before of Maria being told to ensure Aya isn't harmed. But the scene is longer this time, revealing that Father sees Aya as his most precious doll of all. That's right, if you hadn't put it together yet, that's what these experiments are for. Every time that we get a description of a doll, they're described as being incredibly lifelike. They've been moving on their own for the whole game, screaming in agony when hurt, and holding conversations with Aya. Father was obsessed with human experimentation and eternal beauty, so he turned his subjects into dolls to preserve them. The scene switches, showing Mother eavesdropping from behind the door. She becomes disgusted as Father describes his plan to wait until Aya is more ripe before turning her into a doll, ensuring that she is as beautiful as possible. She will be his masterpiece. Mother bursts through the door, reprimanding him for these plans. How could he ever consider turning their own daughter into a doll? Father claims that someday she will be dirtied and therefore must be preserved before then so that he can have the perfect daughter for the rest of his life. Mother turns, planning to march up to Aya's room and take her away to save her life, but before she can do this, Father plunges a knife into her chest, killing her. Maria panics, attempting to treat the wound but being stopped by Father. He demands that she keep this a secret from Aya, although Maria doesn't know if she can do that. The two leave in search of a place to hide the body, leaving Aya crying over her mother's corpse. Her ghost reappears, telling the daughter to run for her own safety. Aya is pulled back to reality, looking at her father in utter horror. Father questions why she looks so scared, slowly walking towards her. The Iron Maiden opens up, revealing Mother's corpse. Aya confronts her father, receiving an unhinged monologue about beauty in return. He knows that Aya will learn to appreciate her mother's eternal beauty one day. Father wanted to wait longer to turn Aya into a doll, but now that Aya has reason to run away, plans have changed. He tells her everything about his experiments, about how many dolls he's made and how proud he is. He asks Aya what kind of doll she would like to be. Upon hearing this nonsense, Aya runs away. She tries to break down the door, but it's locked. A doll from this room blocks the entryway, buying her more time to escape. I actually don't like the pacing of this scene at all. You can't break down the door yet, all you can do is wait and spam the button. The doll blocks the door and just kind of stands there for a while Father slowly turns on his chainsaw, jabs it through the door, and then cuts everything down. As soon as the door is broken down, then Aya can leave by spamming the door. I know they're trying to build tension, but this took way too long to be effective, especially when the only thing you can do is fiddle with the doorknob. Also, I know this was supposed to be scary artwork of a crazed man, but the facial proportions just make it really silly to me. The voice actor totally killed it though. Amazing crazed laughter. Aya breaks down the door, entering the worst communicated QTE in the game. Let me break this down for you. We are being chased by Father. There's a large hallway that you were supposed to run down, so I held the down button only to immediately trip as a QTE prompt showed up. Apparently the QTE of spamming the door was not over yet, and Aya was set to automatically run downwards while you continue to hit buttons and jump over pillars. I really think they should have stopped the red QTE glow, then started it up again once you approach the pillar. The reason that the QTE warning being a red fade on the side of the screen works so well is because it's normally black, so such a drastic change immediately lets you know that it's time to start. Leaving it up negates that. At least I got to see the death jump scare in all its, glory. Aya is chased through the mansion by her father, with the player eventually gaining full control. She runs into Maria, although Father quickly commands his assistant not to let her escape. Back in the room with the bodies covered in blankets, Aya can now use one of the empty ones to hide. Maria runs inside, where it kinda looks like she sees Aya with the big bow poking out. Despite this, she claims to have lost sight of her. Father calls her useless, cutting her down without hesitation. This is where our next ending split happens. Aya can choose to help Maria out or leave for her dad. This is bad end too, so let's leave that home wrecker for dead. Aya rushes down the hallway, hearing the echoes of her father's voice the entire time. He's nearby and getting close quickly. Boo! I know that was supposed to be scary, but that was so freaking funny. Aya sprints away, being stopped by one of the dolls. Father lifts his chainsaw, claiming that he can hide her legs under a skirt if it means stopping her from running now. We fade to black before seeing a hollow-eyed doll of Aya, front and center in the doll room. That was pretty fun. I liked how goofy Father was during the entire chase, even if I was confused on what was needed of me at the start. It's not even remotely scary, but I think if I saw a dude acting like that in real life, I would be terrified. I'm not sure if Maria actually let us live or not, but we should go back and help her like a good person this time around. In the true ending, we use some nearby medical supplies to bandage Maria's wounds. Maria thanks Aya for this. She's always known that Aya hates her and truly appreciates that the girl was willing to help despite all of that. They realize that they cannot live here anymore. Maria was used and discarded while Aya can't live here safely, so why not work together? Aya gives Maria her shoulder as the two head down the hallway. Maria trips, demanding that Aya leave without her despite the protests. Father quickly appears, kicking Maria aside and chasing Aya down. The doll grabs Aya's leg once again, but before Father can immobilize her, Maria tosses several throwing knives into him, toppling him. She throws another set, with one even implanting into his skull. Maria kills the doll, hugging Aya and assuring her that this is for the best. Somehow, even with a knife penetrating his skull, probably sticking into his brain, Father is alive. He stands up to slay the girls, but is stopped by an axe to the head by the blonde boy. The three walk to the entrance hall, finding Snowball sometime in between apparently. It seems as though Mother requested that the blonde boy protect Aya, so he was brought back from his second death. The curse will wear off soon, forcing the boy and every other victim back to where they came. First, the mansion must be destroyed. No one can find this place and continue the horrific work. The boy requests that Aya never forget the victims here. They had no relatives, so their deaths were just erased from the world. Even having one person remember them would make all the difference. Aya promises to never forget them as the boy lights the castle in a blaze. He performs the same good luck charm that Mother did all those years ago before watching them leave. Back in the mansion, Ogre brings Father to a different world where the man can research to his heart's content. Years in the future, a girl makes her way to a small building in the woods called Dubious Clinic. This is a building where Aya and Maria help patients completely free of charge. This is Jean, who is incredibly sick but doesn't have the money to pay for treatment. She heard rumors of this clinic and made her way out as a last resort. An older, short-haired Aya offers to help her out, preparing for an operation with minimal time for a diagnosis. She compliments Jean's eyes. They really are beautiful. Maybe even something that should be preserved. Jean asks if Aya can make her feel better, with Aya promising that she'll never suffer again. She injects Jean with an anesthetic as the camera pans to the back room, where Maria examines a small set of dolls. She remarks that Aya is much like her father before the credits roll. I grabbed doll 20 gems through my playthrough, so we get an extra scene at the end of the game. Aya is alone next to that collection of dolls, hugging one of them and reiterating her promise. She will never forget the victims of that night. In the other world, Ogre checks in on Father. He's been growing a more mature version of Aya to turn into his perfect doll. Ogre chuckles, claiming that he can't wait for her birth, and that one day he hopes she'll be able to visit Father's homeworld. Father claims that he and Aya will always be together. I like a lot about this ending, but it definitely had some oddities. I loved the entire escape with Maria and Aya working together before starting a life together where they could help others instead. I was properly freaked out when it was revealed that Aya had become just like her father, killing innocent people to turn them into dolls, but the final reveal was far better. Aya was only euthanizing people to end their suffering. I'm not gonna get anywhere near the morals behind that. I'm just gonna be thankful that she's not experimenting on these people and turning them into dolls. When it comes to the supernatural stuff, I liked what was going on with the blonde boy. It was cool that he worked together with Mother to save everyone, although I'm not really sure how he was revived. What I didn't like was everything with Ogre and Father. The dimension hopping was already a really weird place to take things, and doing it again here just feels so out of place. I would have been a lot more satisfied if Ogre hadn't resurrected Father to let him continue his research. The consequences for the villain were severely downplayed because of this. He's even been able to create another version of Aya to turn into a doll, which invalidates his biggest loss. Whenever I replay this game, I think I'm just gonna ignore those two scenes and pretend he got what was coming to him. There are 2 additional game modes that you can unlock by beating the game in specific ways. You unlock Blood mode by getting the true ending, and If mode by getting the true ending with all the gems. These are fairly short experiences, so I'll discuss them briefly. Blood mode begins with Aya eating a poisoned apple from a dark-cloaked figure in the woods, despite Maria's protests. She instantly enters a coma, waking up in her childhood home, wondering if she's dead. Blood mode is basically just playing through the entire game again, but as an adult Aya with some minor differences here and there, like Aya not being afraid of the blonde boy since she remembers him saving her in the past. Pretty early on, Ogre tells her that the only way to escape this world between life and death is to destroy that which created this space. I don't really know what that means. The main differences in this version of the game come from books, diaries, and the occasional ghostly memory. The information gleaned from both parents' diaries alongside these memories paints a very different picture of the story. Aya's mother grew up in a religious cult obsessed with the idea of eternal beauty. From a young age, she was interested in killers, writing letters to mass murderers and asking to meet in person. One day, the head of the cult, her grandfather, passed away, entrusting her with continuing his research. Her grandmother insisted that true eternal beauty was attained by continuing one's bloodline. To ensure both grandparents' wishes were granted, she married a serial killer and brought a child into this world. Her husband would join the Dubious family, continuing the experiments while she would spend time raising Aya. The reason she fell in love with her husband was because he tried to kill her when they met, but stopped at the last moment. The madness in his eyes led to an obsession, causing her to raise Aya to be the same. She would show her daughter dead animals and read her violent bedtime stories. Sure enough, it worked. Aya began to hurt small animals. It started with birds, which Father quickly put a stop to, then rabbits and cats. Father was truly distressed. He realizes now that this obsession must run in the family, but these actions were dirtying his masterpiece. The doll would be tainted. He had to stop this. Father spent his time trying to ensure Aya would remain pure, while Mother continuously tried to corrupt her. This is a crazy reveal, and it explains most of the confusion I had surrounding Mother's behavior. I'd bet money she's the one who gave that chainsaw to Aya. One of the only other differences I feel the need to mention is the scene with Jean. She appears behind Aya, claiming that she wants to continue living so that she can also become a doctor and help people, but she couldn't. because Aya euthanized her. When Aya goes through the portal, the scene is essentially the same. She's ripe, as her father so grossly put it, so he chases her down. At the end, she somehow has the magic water and can use it on her father to stop him. She wakes up next to Maria, who used an antidote to bring her back from the edge of death. The strong part of this chapter is definitely the history surrounding Aya's mother. It explained everything from small stuff like the bedtime stories to bigger stuff like how father managed to get a mansion for experiments after being left with nothing. The way it starts and ends and everything with Ogre was just kinda weird to me. Like, I know Aya did not really get the greatest education, but she's not that stupid, is she? The final mode, If mode, took about 5 minutes to complete. You play as the blonde boy right after he killed father. For some reason, Aya passes out this time around, leaving an extra bit of time where Maria looks over her in bed while the boy explores the mansion. This feels really shoehorned in. We never saw Aya pass out before, they just walked through the door. Why change that? Just to add extra exposition? Because that is what this is, exposition. While Aya sleeps, Maria and the boy talk. She questions whether he's really dead since he acts so differently from the other corpses. She apologizes for attacking him earlier, with him telling her not to worry about it. They discuss fate and how the boy will disappear soon as the curse has fully been lifted. He tells Maria that her fate is to watch over Aya and ensure her safety. That's what her mother's wish was, and it's probably why Maria was left alive. We gain control of the character and explore a bit, interacting with ghosts. We get another confirmation that Aya's mother saved him in order to protect her daughter. We learn that Ogre apparently helped in some way, giving out a medicine that healed the knife wounds. Maybe he resurrected the boy, because we know he can resurrect father. We get a short monologue about how Ogre likes watching over humans and manipulating them, and his eyes go all creepypasta and cringy, then he leaves. The boy also talks to the old man, who claimed that mother was even crazier than the doctor, learning that apparently he used to be a servant here as well, but then he quickly realized his role and was killed by her before he could escape. The boy rejoins the others, burning down the mansion with his dead person magic, and then steps outside just like last time. As he watches the building burn down, he is stopped by Aya's favorite doll. She wonders why he isn't tagging along with Aya. He is alive after all. He feels as though he can't because he already lied to them about his state of being. He doesn't want to drag them down, so he'll live a different life and maybe one day they'll cross paths. He promises the doll that if Aya takes the same path as her father, he will stop her. Then the game officially ends. I didn't like this mode. It felt shoehorned in with the placement of the plot points feeling awkward. It really did exist purely as needless exposition on Ogre, the old man, and the boy himself. It's kinda weird that he was brought back to life, and it opens up a weird plot hole near the end. We know that the undead have powers. We've seen that again and again with looping hallways, force fields, locked doors, yada yada. So I'm not too surprised that one of them can start fires. The major question I have is, how did the boy burn down the house like that if he was resurrected? He is alive. Can he keep his undead abilities after being revived? I just don't understand a lot of the reasoning behind anything in that entire extra section. Mad Father was a really fun game. The story in both the main game and the extra blood mode were interesting, although I do think that If mode fell short. I also think that the plot of the main mode strayed a bit too far from its starting point in a very abrupt manner, which did end up detracting from the experience. It's a very serious story combined with a lot of sillier events and assets near the end, and I can't really tell if that was intentional or not. When I see a sprite like this, I immediately assume it's a parody, but here it was kinda difficult to tell for sure. The artwork was generally well done, the voice acting was good, the gameplay was fun, and they found a great way to showcase a lot of danger without killing you over and over again. I wasn't a fan of Ogre's involvement near the end since it really invalidated the message, but it's relatively easy to ignore. I wish there was more variety in the music tracks near the middle, and there was the occasional odd game design choice, but gameplay-wise, this was one of the most solid RPG Maker games I've ever played. They turned characters that I hated into characters that I liked, and characters that I liked into characters that I hated. They created a fairly enjoyable, but definitely pretty goofy game. If you have any interest in picking up this game, I would recommend it as long as you can look past some of the odd plot contrivances. I think the gameplay is worth it in the end. I hope to see you all again. Have a great rest of your day.